What happens when we get to 150?
Anything else to invest in?
Reserve currencies died. You
Or
still did.
input to the Bitcoin network.
I think there's an exponential curve now on how many people can afford one Bitcoin or how many people cannot afford one Bitcoin. At a $250,000 Bitcoin, how many people can own a significant amount of Bitcoin after that? It's probably 0. Bitcoin is the asset that takes us from 1 quadrillion to 2.
Say there's one quadrillion dollars and properties, 300 trillion of it. I think Bitcoin can get to nearly 50% of that entire pie, but it just means
That's a $350 trillion asset. And guess what? Nobody has had to buy a coffee with their house. You don't see people bringing out bricks from their house to go buy coffee with it, do you? No. So let's get Bitcoin to 350 trillion, and then we'll worry about potentially using it to buy coffees. Imagine how crazy the world would be if oxygen was actually scarce. Luke, you know, in America, right, there's Republicans, right? But they're actually leftist cucks. So what they call them are rhinos, Republicans in name only. We have them in Bitcoin. They're called binos, Bitcoiners in name only.
I sold my house and wanted to buy more Bitcoin because I thought that was a much better use of that equity.
If what I'm saying is right on the other side, which is like only the 1% actually matter because it's a monetary network, the 1% don't care. They don't want to spend Bitcoin anyway. They want to spend debt, right? Like I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. I want to spend debt. Nobody cares. It's over.
I've actually had two minor epiphanies this week because it finally clicked in my thick brain how you get to $7 billion per Bitcoin.
Because Bitcoin is so tightly held and people don't want to sell it, they don't want to trade it for anything. A dollar into Bitcoin gets you.
Is the possibility of people owning one Bitcoin over British?
The people that make me the sickest, Luke, are people who believe that
So yes, you are about to listen to the most bullish Bitcoin interview of all time. But before we get started, I know for a fact that 70.6% of you guys watching this channel are not going to get notified when I release an even more bullish interview next week. That's right, I'm flying to Europe tomorrow specifically to record this one interview. So again, if you want to see that when it drops, I recommend subscribing to the channel and hopefully YouTube notifies you of when that one drops. But with all that said, hope you enjoy this one with British and Peter. So I'm back. I've got the two most bullish people on a podcast with me. One's in Australia, one's in Dubai. Welcome, gentlemen. What's new?
Good evening. Good evening, Peter.
Good to be with you.
Nice to be here.
So before we get started, we were talking about some of the biggest mistakes people are making in Bitcoin today, especially new people to Bitcoin today. British, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people are making in Bitcoin?
Firstly, I want to apologize. I've had like laser eye surgery 3 days ago. So the light here is extremely bright. Are you two okay? I don't want to be disrespectful if I just put my sunnies on. Is that okay? Yeah.
Please do.
It just makes everything a lot more tolerable. And a little bit cooler as well, I guess. So where do we begin? Well, the biggest mistake is people are not buying enough Bitcoin, firstly, right? They are trying to figure out ways, and the people that make me the sickest, Luke, are people who believe that their life purpose is suddenly working in Bitcoin, and that is more important than stacking Bitcoin. That shit really pisses me off because it's like you got a once in a lifetime opportunity here to stack this Bitcoin, and you're jerking around trying to get a job in Bitcoin or trying to do this in Bitcoin or that in Bitcoin, rather than going and getting a job, figuring out the fiat opportunity, whatever that is right now, and stacking enough Bitcoin for your bloodline. That really pisses me off.
Can people still
There's
get
been countless people I've talked.
You go, Peter?
I echo that sentiment that I've talked countless people out of going into Bitcoin full time because it would diminish their ability to stack, and they would be sacrificing future wealth for the reputation of working in Bitcoin. But that comes at a huge discount to what they're able to achieve outside the realms of Bitcoin. So to that point, the most important thing is stacking Bitcoin. And if you don't have the technical skill set to develop Bitcoin further, like you're a developer or entrepreneur in actually building out the ecosystem, then the most important thing you can do is literally dollar cost average with the highest wage possible, with the most, with the greatest disposable income, so that you can help get Bitcoin off exchange.
Is the possibility of people owning one Bitcoin over British?
Kind of. It's probably accessible now. If you're starting from scratch, it's like 0.6% of the world that could probably afford to buy one Bitcoin in one go very quickly. So yeah, kind of. I don't know. I guess it depends on how big your bulls are and how hard you're willing to work in a very short period of time. I can't help judge that. You got to stand in front of the mirror and ask yourself, you know, how hard am I willing to go on this journey to stack this Bitcoin really quickly? And what happens when we get to 150? So like I think there's an exponential curve now on how many people can afford one Bitcoin or how many people cannot afford one Bitcoin. And yeah, listen, how long have we all been shouting about this shit? Like how long do everyone just wants us to continue shouting about it for the next 20 years? Like get to one Bitcoin, get to one Bitcoin. It's getting too late.
I've actually had two minor epiphanies this week, which is why I messaged you gentlemen when I messaged you. The first epiphany I want to get into later, Peter, because it finally clicked in my thick brain how you get to $7 billion per Bitcoin. Yes, we talk about the supply suffocation all the time, but I actually sat down and I was thinking about it one day. I don't know when it came to me, but I had an epiphany. So we're going to open up that can of worms. The first can of worms that we're talking about kind of right now, British, is this exponential curve of people being able to get to one Bitcoin. I was Googling the other day, I was chat GPTing actually, how many people in Peru have a $1 million net worth. I was actually shocked.
What is it? 5 people?
It's 139 people can have more than $1 million. And I was
close enough to 5, I guess.
Right? I was shocked. I'm in a city right now of 10 million people, and I was thinking, hang on a minute. 10 Bitcoin, that's $1 million. There's literally 139 people in this entire city with more than $1 million worth of assets.
Yeah, so think about it like this. Sailor last week bought 10 times that. Just one entity.
It's nuts. It's nuts. And then something else I wanted to ask you guys about. We've kind of been speculating for a long time. Okay, there's big entities buying a lot of Bitcoin. We can see the Bitcoin on exchanges leaving the exchanges, but we don't know who's buying it. I saw this week SoftBank, Howard Lutnick, Jack Mallers, Tether teaming up to launch this MicroStrategy competitor, and they launched with 42,000 Bitcoin out the gate.
It's not really true, is it?
Tell me
Because
what
what
you
they've
think
done
about
is
it.
they've launched. Well, that's the idea, right? That's the intention that they've said. What they've actually launched is a SPAC to try and raise money on 2.7, 2.9% of the total value of this future company. And they're going to donate 42,000 Bitcoin to it from all the different entities to start it up. So people are going around saying, oh, they're going to flash buy 42,000 Bitcoin. It's not true. Like they're putting 42,000 Bitcoin into this entity, and the goal of the entity is to try and, as Jack said, which I found quite insulting from being a Sailor fanboy and a day one Sailor investor, is he said, you know, we want to try and be a better and purer version of strategy. I wish them the best of luck because I like the competition, but you know, I don't think they can do that just based on how volatility works.
Yeah, well, I saw the little comparison chart that I think they made internally, trying to say, look, we're better than MicroStrategy. We're more of a pure Bitcoin play than MicroStrategy in each of these different realms. You don't think it's possible they can buy more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy or even get close?
No. I mean, Sailor would literally have to stop. Every Bitcoin that they buy through that entity, 21 Capital, will just push the goal further out because it adds to the volatility of strategy. So I don't know, maybe. I mean, listen, everything's possible, right? And they are part owned by one of the 24 firms that can directly print money from the Federal Reserve. So maybe, but I don't see it as likely.
How about you, Peter? What do you think of this new company?
I think it's a great addition to the Bitcoin treasury companies that are on offer. I think they're going to have huge headwinds in trying to achieve the outcome of getting more Bitcoin than strategy. I think there's an unassailable lead that Saylor literally has to stop in order for them to achieve that outcome. To your point, British, that there's no way that's happening, I think. And this is where it's a paradox that, the closer they get, the further it gets away. And this is the problem with that. I welcome the competition. Having said that, there are very few craftier cats in a cohort of a company that's a Bitcoin treasury company. You've got Lutnick or his kids, which is that's a huge bonus. You've got Paolo at Tether, and you've got Jack. I look at that and think that's a dream team of being able to come up with new and innovative ways. But those new and innovative ways of getting Bitcoin will pretty soon be copied if it's far superior to anything that strategy can come up with. So you only have a microsecond of a head start. And when you're 550,000 coins deep versus 42,000, they're going to have to continually create that innovation to even catch strategy. So I look at it and think it's great. I think Maulers is one of, if not the best Bitcoin hype guy that we've got, along with you, British. So it's going to be fun to watch that enter the corporate world of Wall Street. And I can't wait to see Maulers turn up in a tie and suit. I wonder when that happens. So
can you imagine what CNBC is going to be like, where you have a Bitcoin day and the first guest is Saylor and the second guest is Jack? Like it's lining up to be quite. You know what's quite interesting though? It's like the teams that are being sort of carved out here are quite fascinating, right? On the one side, you've got Saylor and Larry Fink, and on the other side, you've got Lutnick, Jack Mollers, and Paolo. Like it's very intriguing to see who else is going to enter this space.
Now, I wanted to quickly interrupt today's video and tell you, please do not sell your Bitcoin. You don't have to take the tax hit. Go and borrow against your Bitcoin. I think the best place to do that is with FIREFISH. These guys do not re-hypothecate your Bitcoin like Celsius, like BlockFi, or like FTX did in 2022. These guys are fully backed, and you guys can get 30% off your first loan with FIREFISH using that promo code linked down below in the description. And with all that said, let's get back into today's show.
It's funny, I look at strategy as being the Bitcoin reserve, the private Bitcoin reserve for the US. And then I look at Maulers, although he's true, all American, the fact that he's got Lutnick, who's got international exposure, and Tether is international. It's kind of the Eurodollar version of strategy. So
interesting.
I think they're gonna harness all of that, ex-US money, funnel that into 21, and Saylor will look after the US and they'll cover the rest.
Interesting. That's a fascinating way to look at it. Yeah, maybe.
I'm genuinely going to have to think about that after this rip. That is very interesting. I think to the point about the unassailable lead, I think that's an interesting one. I mean, there's 2.5 million Bitcoin on exchanges, and if Saylor holds 500,000, imagine some entity trying to rip 500,000 off the exchanges. What impact is that going to have on the price? And like you guys say, Saylor is going to be buying more in the interim while this is happening. I also just don't think it's possible.
No, too hard. But hey, I want to see it, because the closer they get, the higher the price goes. So
absolutely,
I hope they get there.
I want to see it. I want to see it.
I want to see them
wish Jack
succeed.
all the best. Yep, I wish Jack all the best in accumulating 550,000 Bitcoin.
So Peter, you've got one of the most interesting thought experiments in the entire Bitcoin space. I think a lot of people just listen to the end game or the end number of your hypothetical thought experiment that you put out there. But I had a little bit of a minor epiphany earlier in the week, which is why I reached out to you guys. And let's walk through this hypothetical thought experiment. Let's assume the 5-year trend of Bitcoin continues leaving the exchanges. I think you have a really interesting way to think about valuing Bitcoin in a hypothetical world that the world is operating on a Bitcoin standard. Again, some people don't think we get there. Let's assume we get there, because I don't see this trend of Bitcoin leaving the exchanges slowing down. And I think you've got a really interesting way of thinking about it.
There's two ways of thinking about it. The really simple TLDR on it is there's 450 coins minted in a day. There's $7 trillion of global trade. You simply divide what's minted, what the global trade is on a daily basis by whatever's minted to facilitate what the price needs to be in order to facilitate that trade. Now, obviously, there's huge limitations to that thought process, and fundamentally, it's not correct, but it gets us moving in the right direction. That as more and more coins come off exchange, the only coins that are available for consumption when you've got a functioning credit market behind it is whatever's minted on the day, and we're seeing Sailor buy up 2 or 3 times what's minted on a daily basis, on average, more. And that's just one company. So as this starts rolling and gains momentum, the thought of that as we move to a Bitcoinized world becomes more of a reality. And it's really just an adoption curve on the way to get there. So I look at this and think it's an extreme example, but it's really important to polarize that opinion. And I'm happy to take the slings and arrows of what a foolish thought experiment it is, but it gets us thinking where we're going. And this is where, in an overly simplistic way, that's the valuation that you get to. But if you look at the more, a much more rigorous way of looking at it is the triple point asset, which comes up with a much higher valuation of whatever the number is, and that to me has a lot more intellectual rigor behind it, because it looks at the functions of money, of store of value, mean of exchange, unit of account. It applies sound economic logic to it, that it's a better store of value than gold, it's a better mean of exchange than the US dollar, and not that it's going to supersede the US dollar anytime soon, and it's a much better unit of account than the double entry ledger system that we're using. A lot of the limitations that I think we put on ourselves when we look at the addressable market cap of Bitcoin is we think in linear terms, but this is an exponential asset, and rather than adding those values together to get the number of, call it $100 million a coin, you've actually got to multiply each function of money, because there's a competition for each value or each function of the money in order to get to a much, much larger number than we're familiar with. And this is where, contrary to popular belief, everyone thinks that Bitcoin is going to lead to the end of the credit market. And I'm like, no, Bitcoin, this is just the start of the credit market. And what you're starting to see with the bit bonds and everything else that comes in is people think that Bitcoin is going to implode the credit markets and lead to the end of it. It's like, this is just the start of it. Like, this is the supernova exploding, and the credit markets are going to get so much bigger than we could possibly dream of. But they're going to be backed by an asset that's expanding much faster than the actual boom in the credit markets. And this is the only way that we solve the collateral problem that we've got in the broader markets. But that's a different topic.
I think it's a good topic, relevant.
I agree. I think this is the Bitcoin is the asset that takes us from 1 quadrillion to 2. In terms of money flowing around the world, it's already starting. I am getting offers of people wanting to lend me money on Bitcoin related equities and whatever at central bank rates. I'm getting these conversations are common right now. And I know people way wealthier than me that were getting these conversations much sooner than I was. And also I know people not as wealthy as me that are not being offered these conversations, even though they're with the same banking partners. And so, this is going to expand the debt markets and add more volatility, which is what the debt markets actually need right now.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of ties into, this end game and this, little bit of a hypothetical thought experiment we were laying out there, Peter. Like, if Sailor's sitting on 2.5% of the supply himself, the ETFs hold 1 million coins. What's that? 4-5% of the supply. I think a lot of Bitcoin is going to be held by governments, literally backing their bonds. Like you say, Bitcoin is going to help the credit markets expand, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Bitcoin backing bonds of sovereign nations all around the world.
Yep, that's the only way they get out from under that sovereign debt. And this is if you look at it from an economic perspective, how they've gotten out of every previous one is they've inflated an asset. They've pumped money in, and either property's gone up dramatically to increase the collateral, or alternatively, the stock market's gone up dramatically. They're kind of at an end game that now it's been, the debt problem's been pushed up from a personal to a corporate, now to a government level. The government can't push it up any further, so they need to find a super asset that they can inflate. And this is where, to me, the only asset you want to inflate is Bitcoin, because it makes maybe 10,000 dorks like us super wealthy, but at at a most important level, it doesn't have any downstream consequences for society. Like if you increase the price of property, then you're going to increase the cost of housing. Cost of living pressures are going to go through the roof. It's going to be inflationary to the broader market. But because Bitcoin is so tightly held and people don't want to sell it, they don't want to trade it for anything. Damn, British is basically selling watches to buy more Bitcoin, and that's the love of his life. All of a sudden, we're not spenders. We're not creating inflationary pressures when you support or when Bitcoin goes through the roof. Yes, there will be a little bit, but there's only such a small number of holders that the downstream consequences are so little relative to inflating everything else. And this is where I look at this and think the government's only got one choice, because $1 into Bitcoin gets you somewhere between 2 to 100, depending on how hot the market is, 100x return. But $1 into the bond market is a negative real yield. $1 into the stock market might be a 5 or 10% return. $1 into the property market might be a 20% return. I look at this and think if they've done any work on a cost benefit analysis, they need to basically buy a lot of Bitcoin. Bitcoin bonds is a way to do it. Not only that, it's going to solve the fact that they're all insolvent.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, whether it's
The most important thing is the social consequences side of it, because every other asset that they've used to do this has always had downstream social consequences. With Bitcoin, no one's jumping out of a building because it's too expensive and they can't pay their mortgage or whatever else. It is the absolute perfection of an asset for that purpose.
I often hear that, this is, from my parents' mates that I talk to, one of the criticisms that I hear is, oh, you can't live in a Bitcoin. It's like, that's precisely why this is the perfect asset that Wall Street's going to want to trade and that the governments are going to fund.
Yep. Completely agreed.
agreed as well. Whether Bitcoin's $100 million a coin or $7 billion a coin, I can hear some people squealing in the south of Europe about their fancy lines on charts and their models being broken. Maybe this is a good time to get a little bit of a power law pulse.
He's actually in California, Luke.
No, really?
Yeah, he's he's a Yank, apparently.
I didn't know that, but that potentially explains a lot. British, I want to get a little bit of a power law check-in from you.
A power opinion check-in. Well, I guess we're somewhere between 50,000 and $5 million a coin, so I guess power law is still working right now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that boggles my mind. It's never wrong.
It's just that, yeah. I mean, I guess if we went to 45,000, it would be proven wrong. Even then, because it came straight back into 50, so I guess it wasn't that wrong. Fucking morons.
They're always right. Our experts are always right, British, and yeah, I think a lot of people. I think this cycle in particular, 2025, right now, a lot of people are preparing themselves to sell Bitcoin at 150K, $200,000 a coin because there's some fancy lines on the chart.
Good luck. Sell it. Fucking sell it. I've had enough. I want BlackRock to own all the Bitcoin now. Sell it. I don't care. Bitcoiners just get stupider and stupider every single year. As the price goes up, they want to sell it. They all go on about holding their Bitcoin for as long as possible. Then the price gets high enough and the Lambos get clear enough, and then they want to sell it. Fucking sell it. I want Saylor to own every Bitcoin. I want BlackRock, Larry Fink to control every Bitcoin. Fuck it. Sell it. I dare you. Sell it. Sell it at 200,000 and show me the receipts that you sold it. Don't just talk shit. Put your money where your mouth is and sell it. Then buy your castle, buy your Lambo, buy whatever the fuck else you want to buy, and leave us alone.
That's the biggest thing I want to see. I want to see the people encouraging others to sell. I want to see.
Luke, in America, right? There's Republicans, right? But they're actually leftist cucks. So what they call them are rhinos, Republicans in name only. We have them in Bitcoin. They're called binos, Bitcoiners in name only.
I've never heard that before in my life. That's the best Bitcoin analogy that I've heard since Peter told me about their major metric they track over there at the Bitcoin Advisors. BUM. Bitcoin under, what is it? Bitcoin under management?
Bitcoin under management.
There you go.
So we got BUM and we got Bino on the one call. I love that. Oh, Jesus. Bitcoin is in name only. I fucking love that. First time I've ever heard it.
Anyone who believes in the power law and is going to use that bullshit to try and sell out of their Bitcoin, you're a bino. Like, it's just as simple as that. Like, sell it. Please sell it. Sell all of it. Sell it right now. In fact, don't even wait for the power law. Just dump it now.
Yeah, I mean,
Flood the market.
this is something else that's got me really interested. This cycle, again, a lot of Bitcoiners will cop flack for saying this time is different, this time is different. Who knows if this time is different? But what I think is interesting that the market's held up here at $100,000 a coin, and long-term holders have sold 1 million Bitcoin. They've literally sold 1 million Bitcoin. But all of a sudden, this normally creates the bear market. This normally creates the end of the bull run. But this time, at the same time, we're seeing long-term holders sell 1 million coins. We do have a completely new entrant into the space, and that is these new whales. Like the new number of whales is going parabolic at the exact same time. So,
by the way, remember, not only like we're in the middle of a fucking trade war. In all of our lifetimes, no one has seen this level of trade disruption in the world, right? We've never seen this before. We don't know what this turns into. We are seeing a drastic shift in worldwide trade policy as a result of the US. And Bitcoin is chilling at 95,000. Like, this is
In addition to the
remarkable.
tariff trade war, we've got a global monetary reset happening before our very eyes. And to your point, it's still sitting at 100 or near it. It's unfathomable to me that this is where we are, despite all of the geopolitical events that are happening in front of us.
What happens once the just basic liquidity comes back? Let alone certainty, let alone the education that every one of these amazing firms has now put into effect over the last, 7, 8, 9 months. Like, people, sell it, sell your Bitcoin. Good luck. Try and trade it. Have fun.
yeah, there's lots of different numbers that keep me really interested right now. I think last time the S&P 500 crashed as aggressively as it did last month because of the trade wars was 2020. S&P 500 dipped 35% in 3 weeks. Bitcoin lost 60%. Bitcoin crashed from 10K to $3,800 during those 3 weeks of carnage. The S&P 500 didn't crash 35%, but it crashed 25% in the same 3 weeks. Really aggressive crash. Bitcoin, it had a little bit of a dip to $75,000, $76,000, $77,000, but it was down 10% versus a 60% crash in 2020. I think that just screams somebody's holding the market up right now.
Value to me. That's what I'm seeing in front of us. And this is where it's funny. It feels like Trump's speedrunning the whole world into understanding Bitcoin volatility, because he's bringing the volatility of Bitcoin to traditional markets. And I think people are sitting there squirming about the volatility in traditional finance. And they realize, hang on a second, if I've got to deal with crypto style volatility in traditional finance in my stocks and bonds and everything else, and I'm not getting the return, I may as well move to Bitcoin where I get the return and I'm rewarded for the volatility. And this is where, through time, we're going to see more and more people shift their portfolio to Bitcoin because they realize that volatility is everywhere. And it feels like we're in the early 1920s on that Weimar chart of watching it v gold, where it's just going to oscillate, and the volatility is going to get more and more over the next 10 years, I think, as more and more people move out of where they are to Bitcoin. And there's only one safe haven. And this is where, to me, it's about getting rich, but Bitcoin also helps preserve you from being poor. And that's the flip side of it, that if you stay in those assets, whether it's stocks, bonds, properties, whatever else, you've got to protect yourself from becoming poor by buying Bitcoin. And it might not be so much about getting fabulously wealthy. It might just be avoiding being poor. And the only way to do that is by buying something that others can't fuck with, which is Bitcoin.
The only wrong allocation is 0% Bitcoin allocation.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true, because I don't know. I think there is a valid discussion to be had on owning enough. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's if you're an 18-year-old right now and you've got, I don't know, $1,000 in Bitcoin, or you can use that $1,000 to set up a business that's going to give you untapped upside earning potential. I don't know, which one should you take? I think there's a solid argument in saying you should probably go set up your own business.
I actually filmed a video 2 weeks ago where I completely changed my mind on this topic. I used to scream at everybody and say 100% Bitcoin allocation it's the allocation. And exactly to your point, British, I like thought about it for a lot longer. And I did like different hypothetical thought experiments saying, okay, if you're in your 20s, this is a Bitcoin allocation that makes sense for you. In your 30s, this is a Bitcoin allocation. And if you're in your 50s, I think it's different. And to your point, in your 20s, I've been thinking about it a lot more, British. I think it's a better idea to do that and actually put more of your money and time into actually trying to create a business that actually increases your revenue. To the earlier part of our conversation, sometimes it's better to just try to earn more money so you can buy more Bitcoin.
Absolutely, yeah. Set up the business and then organize it so that the business's profits go into your Bitcoin. That way you've got Bitcoin perpetually being bought for you rather than sitting there going, okay, I've got $1,000 of Bitcoin. Let me go high five some happy hippies.
I agree with all that. The only caveat I put on that is you just need to spend less than you earn. The first rule of finance. As long as you can spend less than you earn, then that's an admirable way to do it, because you're always going to have enough Bitcoin if you're spending less than you earn.
But you know, the problem is there's a cohort right now of Bitcoiners that are like, I own a little bit of Bitcoin, I'm done. It's almost like they've retired. Everywhere has become Berlin, right? Bitcoin has become Berlin. As Peter Thiel said, Berlin is a place where 20-year-olds go to retire. And it kind of feels like that a little bit, right? Like no one's really looking for opportunity. No one's looking for ways to acquire more Bitcoin for themselves. And it's like, okay, I've got $5,000 of Bitcoin and I'm happy now. You're a fucking idiot.
I tend to agree. I think a lot of people are content. I think a lot of people are wrongly content. I don't think enough people look after the Bitcoin they own, firstly, and I don't think they're trying hard enough to earn more Bitcoin.
I don't know. That's between them and God, I guess.
That was me for a few
Not
years.
for me to judge. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was as you call them British, $1,000 net worther. I was back in 2017, 2018, 2019. I was just lounging back on the Gold Coast thinking I'm good. You know, I've got my Bitcoin stack, so to say. And, you know, looking back on it, I was like, fuck, that was a mistake. I wish I'd actually tried to earn more money a lot quicker than I did.
There you go. There you go. I just don't want people to live with regret. That's the main thing for me. It's like, yeah, I can be as harsh as I want to be and whatever, but the real intention is like, can you imagine talking to your children or grandchildren and being like, oh, I didn't buy enough Bitcoin because I couldn't be bothered to work fucking hard enough? That's a tough conversation. This conversation isn't tough. That is a tough conversation. That is what you got to try and prevent.
That's what I'd encourage a lot of people to ask themselves in 6 months' time when Bitcoin's at $150,000 or $200,000 a coin, and all of a sudden it gets really tempting to say, oh, all of a sudden my one Bitcoin's worth 250K. I can sell this and buy a home. I think a lot of people are going to say yes to that decision. They're going to sell their Bitcoin too early, and I think they're going to listen to quote unquote people who they think are experts. And I think in 10 or 20 or 30 years, like you say, British, the harder conversation is going to be like, yeah, I didn't work hard enough and I sold my Bitcoin too soon. Again, if you are looking for somewhere to buy your Bitcoin, I always encourage you guys to check out what the Bitcoin Well is doing. They are our partner here on the YouTube channel and Brandon's YouTube channel, Green Candle, because they force you guys to self-custody your Bitcoin by default. And we're massive fans of self-custody. We don't believe you own the Bitcoin unless you take self-custody of your Bitcoin, which is why we're such massive fans of what the Bitcoin Well is doing, okay? So whether you're a retail pleb looking for somewhere safe and secure to send your family and friend members, or whether you are a high net worth individual looking to buy Bitcoin over the counter, very tight fees, very tight spreads, low fees, we recommend what the Bitcoin Well is doing. They have a service for anyone who needs to get started on their Bitcoin buying journeys. We highly encourage you to check them out. Once you've bought the Bitcoin at the Bitcoin Well, I also always encourage you guys to check out what Stampseed is doing. Yes, it's essential that you put your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet. That's the most important step in Bitcoin. The second most important step that you can take when you self-custody your Bitcoin is writing down your 12 or 24 words. That is your Bitcoin. That's your Bitcoin private keys onto something that's not actually life-proof. Okay, I always encourage you guys, don't write down your Bitcoin backup words on paper. It's terrible. Put them on something like this, These are the titanium plates that Stampseed make. As you can hear, that's real metal, baby.
I have two sides to me. I don't know. Sometimes it's like a schizophrenic reality when you're in this space, because it's like on the one side of me, I don't really fit in anywhere. That's the problem, because I'm not really a hardcore like cypherpunk Bitcoiner, and I'm also like I care a little bit too much compared to like going full balls to the wall tradfi, right? So it's like I'm in this weird space in the middle where on the one side I have the angels saying, "Oh no, you gotta actually like help people get some Bitcoin." And then on the other side, I'm like, fuck it. It's incentives. It's all incentives based. They're going to get their Bitcoin taken from them because the real players are in the game. They're going to incentivize you to do stupid things with your Bitcoin, and you're going to do it because you're a moron, and your Bitcoin's going to get taken from you. They don't care. People don't realize that these people do not care in the reality of the grand scheme of scarcity. They don't care whether your children end up with Bitcoin or not. They don't care whether your last name has a single Satoshi to it or not. Why? Because it's a zero-sum game. It is not like real estate. It's like, at the end of the way I like to think about it now, imagine how crazy the world would be if oxygen was actually scarce, right? Imagine how nuts the world would be if oxygen was scarce. Well, capital is the oxygen of power, and this is the best capital we've ever had.
That's so true, British. One of the greatest sayings I like from Zig Ziglar is money is not the most important thing on earth, but it is damn close to oxygen. And if you
Absolutely.
supplant money for Bitcoin, I think, and this is one of the things that I've been going on for a little while, a lot of people think that Bitcoin is a want, but it's actually a need. I think we understand it's a need, but maybe 1 million people on earth understand it's a need. And there are 8 billion people who are going to find out really quickly that this isn't a want and a nice to have and, oh, it's a nice fluffy, I can get rich. It's like, if I want to breathe, I need to have Bitcoin. And so, with the advent of AI and robots taking over the world and all that, doom talk, the only way to circumvent that is to have Bitcoin. And this, to me, I'm absolutely certain of, that Bitcoin is a need, not a want, except the world hasn't woken up to that yet.
What price do people begin to wake up to that reality? We're about to cross.
I think everyone finds it in their own time. Sadly, I think everyone's got to go through that lived experience. They've got to go through and circumvent all of the FUD that they get presented with. They've got to do their own research. This is where the work you two do is so invaluable, because you just dispel a lot of the problems with Bitcoin and actually educate people on why this is really important for them. And this is where everyone has to go through their own hero's journey, and you find it at the time you need it. And this is where it's not when you want it, it's when you need it. And usually Bitcoiners are born out of desperation. You look at Michael Saylor, the greatest, I think, our greatest representative of Bitcoin at the moment, and his whole shtick has been carved through desperation. It was a need, not a want.
I truly have a feeling that if they do not wake up by $250,000 Bitcoin, they will never wake up. Like at $250,000 Bitcoin, how many people can own a significant amount of Bitcoin after that? It's probably 0.3% of the world, right? To own and in my books, a significant amount is 1 Bitcoin minimum, right? Like 0.3% of the world. And then it's like, okay, those people are not going to actually wake up. So you're probably going to add, I don't know, less than 5,000 new significant holders after $250,000 Bitcoin. It's done. There's a finite time on this.
I was hopeful that
You can go back to watching their fucking TV shows or whatever else they do.
The Netflix programming or the CNBC programming, there's all sorts of distractions available to the common man today, that's for sure, British.
Yes.
I'm hopeful $1 million is going to do it. Like, maybe $100,000 will light some fires under some asses, but if that doesn't do it, I think gapping straight to $1 million would be that's probably the next psychological barrier that might.
I have a sneaky suspicion of what's going to happen in terms of Bitcoin consciousness. I said something like almost like 8 months ago, which what I said was, I think we've reached peak Bitcoin education. And people are like, what the fuck do you mean by that? And the reason why I said that is because so little people can actually afford a significant amount that it, like, the powers that be don't really care about educating the masses. It doesn't matter. You got to educate the 1% that can actually afford the most amount of Bitcoin. So BlackRock and all the funds and everyone else are not focused on retail. They don't care. They're focused on the people that can actually buy the significant amount of Bitcoin because they understand it's a monetary network, not a human network. So I have a feeling that when we get past 1 million, up to 1 million, the purpose of the marketing and the hysteria is going to be to wake up the wealthy people, right? You wake up the wealthy people by injecting it into the consciousness. Now, this is just a theory of mine, right? I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. It's just a feeling that I have. As soon as it gets to 1 million, all the shit's going to go silent. Because at that point, all the wealthy people will already be aware. They'll already be willing to listen. And it will just become as a private banker told me 4 days ago, it will become the best private banking asset we have. And that's it. It will disappear from consciousness overnight. No one will talk about it because it will have penetrated the wealthiest class.
I think that's super.
I don't know.
That's a good point. So looking at mobile, like the same as mobile adoption, or just adopted, it'll consume 99% of the monetary network, so it's over then anyway. But on a personal level, it still means everyone will go on their own personal journey, regardless of how wealthy you are. And they'll figure it out when they figure it out. But from the success of Bitcoin being a monetary network, because the 1% will have got it, and that's, call it 90% of the wealth, the show's over. That's an interesting thought.
This is why I think we're going to see these different adoption curves. So I got two thoughts on it. 100% agree with you, British. I think, like you just said, Peter, 90% of the wealth in the world is probably held by 1%. Okay. I think these guys are waking up to Bitcoin earlier than most people, like obviously BlackRock, all of the world's largest asset managers, 50% of hedge funds are holding Bitcoin today in some way, shape, or form. I think they are so much further ahead of the curve than the retail masses. This is why I think we're going to see these two curves of adoption. Like the first one is like the one that actually impacts price, store of value adoption curve. So how many people of the biggest people who actually matter, what percentage of their money are they putting into Bitcoin? And then I think we got this second adoption curve that all the Bitcoiners are trying to influence. And this is the getting mum and dad and Auntie Jane and Uncle Bob to be able to go buy a coffee with Bitcoin, the medium of exchange adoption of Bitcoin. Everybody's trying to influence this adoption curve, but I just think this is naturally going to happen second, and it's going to happen much slower than the first adoption curve because, like your point, British, I think the rich are buying Bitcoin sooner. What are your thoughts on that?
It ain't happening. It ain't happening. The spending Bitcoin dream is just a bunch of bullshit. Like it's not going to happen. There's no reason to spend it. Most importantly, the tax treatment won't change. So therefore, you're instantly 20% at a negative 20% or whatever your cap gains rates are the moment you spend it. So incentives wise, you won't spend it. It's not happening. I've been saying this for so long, like it's not happening. Even Jack Mallers had to pivot. like the guy talking about, okay, you're trying to bring Bitcoin payments to things. Like I'm sure there'll be institutional rails and this, that, and the other that uses, some form of something built on Bitcoin to move value across the world. But that will be an exception. In terms of like normal people using Bitcoin to spend, that shit ain't happening. It's for happy hippies rolling around some third world fucking country making themselves feel good about themselves. That's it. It's not happening. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares about that. Maybe we can revisit it once we've, I was doing an event. I was on a panel with Saifedean, right? And he said, look, the first thing you got to do is actually fill up people's wallets, right? You have to actually get a lot of people first. Right. You have to actually get a lot of wealth. That's going to take a lot of time. Like a lot of time. And only then and then if what I'm saying is right on the other side, which is like only the 1% actually matter because it's a monetary network, the 1% don't care. They don't want to spend Bitcoin anyway. They want to spend debt. right? Like I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. I want to spend debt. I don't care about spending Bitcoin. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's over. All the happy hippies can go back and get a real job and live with their parents again because it's finished.
Store of value first, medium exchange second.
Yeah, I'm planning.
By the way, how many people buy coffee with their houses?
No,
Well, that's a
precisely zero.
$350 trillion asset. That's a $350 trillion asset. And guess what? Nobody has had to buy a coffee with their house. You don't see people bringing out fucking bricks from their house to go buy coffee with it, do you? No. So let's get Bitcoin to 350 trillion, and then we'll worry about potentially using it to buy coffees. It's such a waste of fucking time. All of these people that I see doing this, I'm like, please go get a real job. Please take these skills that you have for marketing, go get a real job, earn some money, and buy some Bitcoin because you are going to regret this period in life. I'm sorry. I know I'm an asshole. I get it. I'm sorry. You are fucking this up. You have to own Bitcoin. Owning it is the best thing you can do at this point. The whole community, everyone talking about El Salvador. By the way, I'm a big President Bukele fan. I think what he's done with El Salvador is amazing outside of Bitcoin, right? But as far as like actually like turning it into legal, it's a $20 billion country. It's a $20 billion economy, right? For the whole country. Miami, the city of Miami is $400 billion. So as far as when I say this, it's going to sound insulting, but it's not. It's just insignificant. And they haven't managed to get Bitcoin adoption in terms of actually using it for payments. So you think, and they've reduced taxes to zero. So you think America's going to do it when you got a 30% cap gains every time you spend it? It's already complicated because every time if I send Bitcoin from one of my wallets to another one of my wallets, I need to get an accountant to make sure that there's no tax liability in that. It ain't happening. And again, like I'll say, no one's been using their fucking houses to buy their coffees, so they don't need to use their Bitcoin.
I actually literally pictured, as you said, that British, you going out there, getting your little chisel and trying to get a brick out of your house to pay for a coffee. That cracked me up. Speaking of houses, Peter, did I hear correctly? You recently sold your house, and if so, what have you sold it for?
I did. I sold my house, and the TLDR on that is I wanted to buy more Bitcoin because I thought that was a much better use of that equity. So, had a very gracious wife who was supportive of that decision, and obviously, you know, it's a house we live in with our children. So there was, a lot of
it's not easy.
A lot of work went into that and sacrifice on my wife's part, which I'm very grateful for. But the economic decision to sell a home to buy Bitcoin is just, when you look at the math of it, is an absolute no-brainer. It doesn't make sense to own property in Sydney. Like, we've got an average median house price in Sydney of $2 million, and the average income is $100,000. Like 20 times the average income is just, it's chasing a dream that's no longer there. And this is where, one of the things I look at, that a lot of people say the baby boomers got lucky being born when they did, and they had a tailwind of, huge property rises and the rest of it. It's like, look, they had a system that they had to work in, and I don't admonish any of their success. To be successful in that system was a lot tougher than where we are now. All you have to do in our era is buy as much Bitcoin as you can, and I think that's a much simpler proposition than having to deal with property financing it, dealing with interest rates, dealing with tenants, maintenance, you name it. That's a much more difficult value prop. And I look at this and think, property in Australia, I believe, is completely cooked. We have the highest cost per income ratio in the world, higher than Canada, and Canada or Vancouver's property market's stupid. Sydney's just as bad, if not worse. And it just doesn't make any sense to hold that much equity in a family home that, I think there's limited upside from an equity perspective. And then to rent in Sydney is exceptionally cheap. It costs 2% of the value of the property. And I look at this and I think 2%, there's a 1.1% land tax on that. So the owner of the property is getting less than 1% of the value of the property in a rental yield. I look at that and I think, well, until the rental yields go to somewhere between 7 to 10% per annum, there's no point in owning property. So to me, it's a very simple decision. And obviously, it's quite an emotional one for the family, but it's the right one from an economic perspective.
Well done.
Yeah, good work
Thank
on
my
you.
wife.
Well
Isn't
done,
she-
Mrs. Peter.
She's the one who mistook you for British, didn't she?
Let's not get into that.
Please no.
I had to go get laser eye surgery just to make sure that we look different.
We'll encourage the listeners to go watch one of our prior interviews to get caught up to speed on that little story. That's a fascinating one. But yeah, kudos, great stuff there, Peter. I'm sure the wife will be happy with that decision in 10 years' time when you show her the A and B comparison. This is what our home would be worth today if we hadn't have sold the Bitcoin, and this is what the Bitcoin is worth today that we sold the home for. So great job there, Peter.
Yeah, I think she'll be happy with that. And what's interesting, and this is what we're seeing actually in the last 6 months, has been a complete sea change with a lot of our older clients that we work with, baby boomers. We are finding are selling like large percentages of their property portfolio to put that into Bitcoin, because I think they realize, they're doing the sums, looking at, what they do. They might be 65 years of age. They're looking at their kids. They've got 2 kids living at home thinking, hang on a second, my kids are living at home. There's no way, they know what they earn. They know what they've saved. They know there's no way on earth that the 2 of them combined could afford to buy the property that they're living in, that the parents own. And I think the parents are doing the sums in their head thinking, hang on a second, this property investment has got a very limited runway if the next generation is responsible for basically propping up this Ponzi scheme of the property market. And therein lies the problem, that particularly in Western economies, we all have a demographic cliff that we're going to, and all of the wealth is tied up with the boomers. And the lower generations haven't really been able to accrete that wealth to purchase what the boomers have created. So I look at this and think a lot of our work's being done now by boomers who are realizing we need to get off that property ship as quickly as possible and move to, the new asset that no one really has understood yet, which is Bitcoin.
That's fascinating. Again, we've been speculating, well, I've been speculating for a long time. I think like a lot of that $300 or $350 trillion real estate market, it's purely there because it's capital looking for a store of value, somewhere safe to put its capital. And I think it's fascinating that we've got boomers selling their homes for Bitcoin. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I've been trying to say this for a while. Like everyone's saying, okay, and I understand, the runway that these institutions have created trying to frame up Bitcoin against gold. But I've been saying for a while, I think the real target is real estate. It's not gold. Gold is a step along the way. The real competitor for Bitcoin is real estate, or rather, the real competitor for real estate is Bitcoin. It's just such a perfect asset for everything real estate does. And then you can let real estate prices stagnate, which will basically balance out, over the next decade, 15 years, something like that. It will improve the wages to the affordability, basically, of houses, which should take care of a lot of societal issues. And then you just have this pristine asset that you can use and pump up as much as you want, and nobody cares.
That's an important point you make as well. Real estate probably more likely to stagnate in today's value or today's dollars as opposed to crash. I think a lot of people hear me get super uber bullish about Bitcoin, and I think some people misinterpret what I say, and some people think I'm saying, yeah, $300 trillion from the real estate market, it's going straight into Bitcoin over the next 2 years and real estate plummets by 90%. I just don't think that's likely. I think the more likely outcome is it kind of stagnates, grinds sideways for a decade while Bitcoin slowly but surely eats into that, and slowly but surely maybe matches it in market cap one day.
It's just basically like no new capital goes into it, or not no new, but less and less new capital goes into it.
I agree with that. You just watch the pie of Bitcoin getting, the much, much bigger. It'll consume more and more, and you just have a stagnant asset. It's, I think the property market in Australia could look like the Japanese stock market for the last 30 years. That could be the future of, Western property. basically you go nowhere for 3 decades because you've got all that excess, and it's way, way, way above. It's going to take 3 decades to correct itself. But at the same time, there's only one asset that you really want to own moving forward, and that's Bitcoin, because that will grow into and take up, a much larger percentage of the pie. And this is where my expectation is, out of the total value, if you carve a pie out at the moment and say there's $1 quadrillion and properties, 300 trillion of it, I think Bitcoin can get to nearly 50% of that entire pie. But it just means that the pie grows from 1 trillion to 10 trillion, and you've got $4 or $5 trillion in Bitcoin, and everything else makes up the rest. So it's accretive to everyone, including the property owners. But if you want to increase your percentage of that pie, you have to buy Bitcoin because that's the fastest growing asset.
I love that analogy to the Japanese stock market. I think that's absolutely fascinating. Gentlemen, I've taken up nearly an hour.
It's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, it's really
a perfect analogy. Yeah.
I love it. I've taken nearly an hour of your time, gents. Do you have any final thoughts or final things, or messages you want the people listening in to really focus in on?
No.
Well, I'll say, get to 1 Bitcoin.
I love it. I love it. Get to 1 Bitcoin. If you want to learn more about why you need to get to 1 Bitcoin, go and follow British Hodl on YouTube. Subscribe to his email. Puts out a ton of great content. And if you want to learn more about why you should protect your Bitcoin, set up a multi-signature Bitcoin setup, or just learn more about how you can improve your Bitcoin security, go check out Peter at the Bitcoin Advisor. Gentlemen, is there anything else I've forgotten to mention today? Or is there anything else we should talk about before we round this thing up?
No, I think we're good, but let's catch up in another quarter and see what unfolds. I think it's going to be an explosive quarter, so I'm looking forward to the catch up in 3 months' time.
Oh, okay. Yep. Round table. I'll go first. Is the bull run over? No, I don't think it is. How about you guys?
Nah.
You got to be retarded to ask me that question. Sorry, bro.
Well, look at my glasses. I'm wearing these big blue light blocking glasses. I look slightly on that side of things.
I never took you for a leftist American, but hey, I guess things can change.
Hey, I'm
Spend too much time in South America. That's what happens.
I'm in Peru right now, one of the most bloody authoritarian countries getting around. I'll be careful with what I say, but maybe they've influenced me, British.
Oh, shit. We lost one.
This is our first call. We've all been on different continents, I think. You're in Australia, British. Peter, you're in Australia, British, Dubai. I'm still here close to your old home, British, in South America. How are you finding the move?
Dubai is amazing. It is the mindset here is unbelievable. You know what I love about Dubai? Never thought I would love this as much as I do. I love the fact that there's no discussion of politics. Like the only politics that get discussed here is like everywhere else. There is absolutely zero discussion because it is true merit-based. Either you agree with it and you stay, or you don't agree with it and you leave. It is a binary decision. There is no debate. There is no making you think that your opinion matters, because it doesn't matter. Even in my country, in the UK, it does not matter, right? At the end of the day, you can fight about whatever your opinion is. Whatever's going to happen tends to end up happening anyway. So I love the fact that there's no discussion. It's like, do you like it? Cool, stay, welcome. Everyone's great. You don't like it? Go home. Like go somewhere else. I love that part.
Speaking of leaving, British, were you responsible for the $20 billion hole in capital gains tax that the UK government didn't get because they had expats leaving?
No. Unfortunately not. I wish I was, because that would be a great fuck you to them. But no. But again, like I've come to the conclusion now that, after seeing that, and it's taken so many years to see that, right? I left years ago, and it's taken so many years to see that number actually being advertised, right? We all knew it was happening. But the reality is that if you care about your country that's making the wrong decisions, the only thing that you can do at this point, with the way that the populaces are brainwashed and everything else, is leave. because hopefully one day the finances and the financial damage will actually create the incentive to fix the issue, because nothing else seems to work. They weaponize democracy to try and basically to try and move an agenda in any way that they want. So it's like opinion clearly doesn't matter. Debate clearly doesn't matter. So the only thing that you can do if you care is actually leave. And it's sad, but it actually works.
I 100% agree with that, dude. 100% agree. I think it's just gonna, the top 1% leaving. So in most countries, the top 1% pays 50% of the taxes. I was looking at California, top 1% pays 50% of the taxes. If right now 300,000 people are leaving California every single year, that's 0.1% of the population, roughly. So if you have that trend continue for another 10 years, all of a sudden, 10 times 0.1, 1% of the tax base is gone in California. And I think it's like an exponential process, because as 300,000 wealthy Californians leave every year, these guys are paying disproportionate amount of taxes. So as they leave, that means the more money has to get printed in California, the more crazy and the weird things get, because the government has to come up with all of these different distractions to justify higher tax rates and more money printing. So I 100% agree. I think the best thing you can do to a country that is your ex-home is leave. I left Australia 4 years ago. Don't regret it in the slightest. And I think encouraging more people to do the same, it's only going to accelerate this transition I think we're living through.
Do you guys have an exit tax to leave if you leave Australia? Do you have a wealth exit tax or anything?
No.
No, but what they do is if you pay the capital gains tax on the day you leave, you get a 50% discount in the capital gains tax. Or if you don't, then you get the full 50 cent in the dollar tax when you pay it later down the track.
But that cap gains is what, on all of your assets thus far, or just for that year of realized gains?
All of everything. It's
So
like you've sold everything on exit. Yep.
That is an exit tax. That is the exit tax.
Unless if you don't sell the assets, then there's no exit tax.
Yeah. Okay. So at least there's an option. It's better than the US, right? So the US, you just have to pay 22% or whatever it is on that day. Wow, that's insane. Wow.
That's a good one. You don't have any.
The other thing that's insane. The other thing that's insane is we've got an unrealized capital gains tax being proposed again in our superannuation on our pensions. So I look at this and I think it's very unpopular. But there's only 80,000 people who it's going to affect to start with. So they're going to ram this through, and no one cares about a rich bloke who's got more than $3 million in their pension. But what they don't realise is that under hyperinflation, everyone's going to be in that model in a minute, and everyone will be paying the tax. And that's the thin edge of the wedge to basically get unrealised capital gains normalised, and then spread that from the pension system across to every other structure that we've got.
Yeah, it's happening. I mean, you know the Nordic countries, right? It's happening over there already. So it's like, it's just been so damaging. Yeah, it sucks. But I just want to let you guys know, paying zero taxes is fucking amazing. Just want to let you know that.
The big draw. I might come join you over there in Dubai in the not too distant future here, British.
Anytime you want, I'll set you up with my lawyers and they'll help you out.
I'd appreciate that a lot. And I appreciate both of you guys for all of your time today. Thanks again. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
See you guys.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, British.